That was Roxanne by The Police, or as they're now known, Sting. A song about a prostitute. Doesn't say what her surname is. Must give her a call sometime.
Whoa! That's English for stop a horse.
Allen's back on his feet. The new series continues tonight at 10 on BBC Two.
Dead Ringers is an award-winning Radio 4 comedy that celebrates those special people who bring meaning to our lives.
People misunderstand me. They think that the only thing that Russell Crowe's about is stealing other men's wives and brawling at award ceremonies, which is nonsense. Because I'm quite happy stealing other men's fiancés and brawling in the street as well. Don't mess with me, Sunbeam.
Imitation is the sincerest form of mockery. Dead Ringers starts tonight at 9 on BBC Two.
Oh, grand. Is that you home, son?
Did you have yourself a grand day, Stuart?
You put the kettle on, son. A cup of tea would be grand.
What a grand idea, John.
If your kids are away at college and they want to watch their own TV, they need to have a TV licence. If they're caught without one, they could face a fine of up to £1,000. And if they do get a fine, who'll end up paying for it?
That'll need clearing up.
Make sure you do a grand job.
Phone 0845 602 7777 to buy a TV licence now.
We escape to the country in 10 minutes after a mid-afternoon summary of the news on BBC Two with Huw Edwards.
Good afternoon. The weapons inspectors are back in Iraq preparing to resume their search for weapons of mass destruction. It's 4 years since their last work there. First formal United Nations inspection is due to take place towards the end of November. Iraq has pledged to cooperate and insisted it has nothing to hide.
Back on the ground in Baghdad almost 4 years on. This the start of a mission that'll determine whether or not there's war. It's been described as Iraq's last chance. The chief weapons inspector promising to be impartial as he begins his crucial task.
We have come here for one single reason, and that is because the world wants to have assurances that there are no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
The job ahead for the inspectors is massive. They haven't been in Iraq since 1998, and they're talking of several hundred sites they now want to search. The first full-scale inspections are due to begin in less than 10 days. Iraq then has until December the 8th to come up with a list of prohibited weapons that it insists it doesn't have. But Iraq says it has nothing to hide. And if the inspectors do an honest job, the truth will be revealed. Many Iraqis worry that the Americans don't want the inspections to go smoothly because they're determined to go to war. The message from Washington to Saddam Hussein, though, that it's all now in his hands.
Leaders of the Fire Brigade Union are meeting this afternoon to discuss resolving the pay dispute. This morning, the Deputy Prime Minister, John Prescott, met the employers, then spent an hour and a half in talks with the union's General Secretary, Andy Gilchrist. Negotiations are expected to resume in the next couple of days, but an 8-day strike is still on the cards starting this Friday. Well, Branwen Jeffries, our correspondent, has been following the progress of the talks. We can talk to her now. Branwen, what's the latest word there?
Well, Huw, I think we're going to see another week of brinkmanship leading up to that deadline on Friday. Both sides described the talks this morning as being very constructive. The union's gone away to think about them, so we will see more negotiations. But the question is, how much wriggle room have both sides left each other? The word from Downing Street was very, very unequivocal this morning. It simply was that there is no more money. Now, that's not going to be a message that the members of the union will want to hear. Their leaders will have to try and negotiate a deal which perhaps provides something over the longer term. But they're going to have to give something on those key issues of modernisation, which the government is pressing and making absolutely clear are integral to any pay deal that will be reached this week or in the future.
All right, Branwen, thank you very much. The Prime Minister is to meet the Conservative leader Iain Duncan Smith later today to discuss the threat of terror to the United Kingdom. The meeting was arranged at Mr Duncan Smith's request. This morning, 3 men of North African origin were remanded in custody, charged with having fake documents for use in preparation of acts of terror. Salvage teams are trying to prevent a giant oil slick from causing an environmental disaster in northern Spain. 3,000 tonnes of oil have already leaked out from the 26-year-old tanker Prestige, which was damaged in a storm. It's polluted more than 50 miles of coast, and all fishing in the area has been suspended. The body of the Moors murderer, Myra Hindley, will be cremated later this week. An inquest into her death is due to be opened and adjourned this afternoon at High Point Prison. Small babies who are kept away from people with colds could be less likely to develop asthma. New research suggests that the common cold virus can affect babies' immune systems, which can in turn trigger wheezing and asthma later on in life.
Coughs and colds are all part and parcel of childhood. Harry here at just 9 months has had his fair share of them, but now research suggests that avoiding infection in the first few months of life could prevent asthma later on. Although the work's been done in mice, not children, it indicates that getting the immune system to fight colds in the early months could shape its coping abilities in the future. Protecting babies early on is common sense, but most paediatricians would accept that exposure to bugs is an important way of priming the immune system. And what the tests on mice has shown is that the timing of the first infection is significant. One of the most likely reasons for infants being admitted to hospital is breathing difficulties caused by a cold virus called RSV. Nearly half will experience long-term effects. Building on this research, scientists hope that one day they'll be able to develop a vaccine against this cold virus and so, in theory, reduce incidence of asthma. But they warn that in the meantime, parents shouldn't be unduly worried.
That's it. There's more on BBC News 24 throughout the day. I'll be back at 6 on BBC One. Bye for now.
Two city slickers are escaping to Lyme Regis on BBC Two in 5 minutes. Then Ainsley's cooking up trouble in the kitchen at 4:30, followed by The Weakest Link at 5:15.
This is BBC Two Southwest.
Good afternoon. The Ministry of Defence has admitted a serious breach of security after 2 anti-nuclear protesters broke into Devonport Dockyard over the weekend. The intruders were in court today after being arrested on the deck of HMS Vanguard on Friday night. Scott Bingham reports.
6 a.m. outside Devonport Naval Base, and the moment 30 peace protesters had been waiting for. In a show of force, 100 police officers were drafted in to guard the dockyard following the weekend's break-in. But it wasn't enough to stop 6 activists from chaining themselves with plastic tubing. They staged a sit-in protest at the refitting of Trident nuclear submarines.
The job situation is a bit of a spin by the government, because if the government decided today to disarm Trident, there would be decades, if not generations, of work to dismantle the system.
Although the police were out in force today, security was distinctly lacking on Friday night when 2 protesters managed to breach the base's defences. Unarmed, they reached the deck of HMS Vanguard before being eventually arrested. 2 were released on bail by Plymouth magistrates today. The government's also confirmed a full external review of the base's security will now take place.
Fire chiefs in Devon have backtracked on a decision not to automatically respond to fire alarm calls or lift incidents. Normally, all automatic fire alarms, like this one at this Plymouth hotel fire earlier this year, get a response. But on the advice of the government, it was decided that in Devon, during the current strike action, a response would only be made after a call from a member of the public. That decision was today reversed by senior fire officers. Gas engineers are still trying to restore supplies to some homes in St Ives following the heavy flooding last week. 700 properties affected by the floodwaters have now had their gas reconnected, but another 300 are still waiting. Transco hopes to restore supplies to all homes over the next couple of days. Cornish fishermen say plans to cut the cod quota by nearly a half would have a catastrophic effect on their industry. The proposals are being considered by the European Commission in Brussels today. Cornish fishing leaders say cod fishing is worth nearly £1 million a year to the county. Now, with Christmas approaching, spare a thought for the shoppers of Saltash. While Plymouth celebrated its Christmas lights being turned on last week, Saltash will have to go without this year. Officials say the lights are just too old. The council's planning to replace them for next year. On to the weather for tomorrow. Cloudy with rain at times, especially in the west. The top temperature 12 Celsius, and that's in a strong southeasterly wind. Our next update on the news and the local weather is at 6:30 on BBC One. Till then, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Well, fog was a real problem for the rush hour this morning, and it looks as though it's going to be a problem for some tonight and also tomorrow morning. I say tonight because you can see it hasn't moved. This is fog showing up across Lincolnshire and East Anglia, and it's just going to thicken up tonight and become more widespread. I think, though, the areas will be slightly different tonight. I think it's mainly central and eastern England at risk from that fog. Visibilities could be down to around 100 or 200 metres, so do watch out first thing in the morning. Now, the temperatures tonight will be a little bit higher. Out to the west, the winds will be picking up, so temperatures here around 7 to 9 degrees, but we could still get a touch of frost further to the east, I think, where those winds are just that little bit lighter. Now, tonight you could see the Leonid meteors. It's the last chance to see them this century. You can see them from 9:30 onwards, the peak activity around 4 o'clock. Unfortunately, though, the weather not really on our side. Most places will be foggy, certainly by 4 o'clock in the morning, or rather cloudy if you're out to the west. Now, tomorrow morning we'll start off with that fog then, quite dense in places, but I think it probably will lift in many areas. One or two spots could stay with it for the afternoon. Out to the west it will always be cloudier, and I think we'll see some persistent rain getting into southwest England and southern Ireland during the afternoon. On the eastern side, perhaps just 1 or 2 showers during the day, but generally speaking most places dry for central and eastern parts of the United Kingdom. The temperatures tomorrow, well, up to a mild 10-11 degrees in the west, but where the fog lingers, perhaps struggling to get much above 5 degrees. And then for the end of the week, well, it looks as though it's going to become wet and windy for many of us. Bye for now.
Why is the monitor switched off? Why am I doing this to a dead patient? I can walk. So you handed my coffee.
I could just sneak into your room tonight.
Yes. Yes. She was after that toffee in my pocket, but she'd actually grabbed my left testicle, sir.
TLC, tonight at 9:30 on BBC Two.
Dead Ringers is an award-winning Radio 4 comedy that celebrates those special people who bring meaning to our lives.
Now, let me tell you something. I was repeatedly bullied at school. They treated me no better than a dog or a bargain hunt contestant. Was it because I was orange? Or was it because I was just generally an annoying tit? We don't know.
Imitation is the sincerest form of mockery. Dead Ringers starts tonight at 9 on BBC Two.
The heat is rising in the Ready Steady kitchen in an hour here on BBC Two after we escape the hustle and bustle of city life for lashings of land in the country.
Today on Escape to the Country, house hunting on the south coast for the city dwellers who've had enough after half a century of commuting.